I know a lot of you already. My name is Krista James, and I'm the National Director of the Canadian Centre for Elder Law. So our work is focused on legal issues impacting seniors. So I'm here to chair this last panel that's between you and dinner, I think. It's a panel focused on legal issues, and I think it follows well from some of the more socio-political issues that Anne-Marie and Sharon were just talking about. So we have 3 lawyers on this panel today. Interestingly enough, their careers have followed very different paths, but they've sort of come together after years of practice into a focus on aging. I've worked with all 3 of them personally on lots of different initiatives, and most recently with our project on assisted living. All 3 made significant contributions to the project. I actually asked Jim to bring a few copies of our assisted living report if some of you haven't seen it and would like a copy. So I think what we'll do for this panel, are we a little bit behind schedule, Gloria?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to check the time, and only a few minutes? Okay.
We said we'll be quick.
Okay. So we're going to have an hour for this panel then, I think, instead of an hour and 15. Okay. So we wanted to allow a little bit of time for questions, and I think everyone prepared like a 20-minute PowerPoint. Do you think you could aim for more like 15 minutes? Is that doable? Sure. Okay. So we're going to aim for all 3 panelists will speak in an order for 15 minutes and then hold all questions to the end. They're sort of, the presentations sort of speak to each other, so you may find that your question shifts by the end of the presentation. So I think what I'll do, I'm going to give you an overview and then introduce each presenter right before they talk. So just to give you a sense as to how we're heading with this focus on things to consider before selling your home and moving into a rental unit or assisted living as you move kind of along the life course. The first presentation is Jim Emmerton, and his presentation will focus on specifically that question. He's going to do a comparative presentation of things you should think about before moving into a more shared model of living. Martha Jane Lewis is going to be speaking specifically to legal issues. She'll address the rights and responsibilities of landlord, tenants, and condo owners, and she'll provide some basic information on some common challenges and highlight key legal issues, I think following really well from some of the stuff Sharon was talking about just a moment ago. Jina will be focusing on assisted living context, and he'll provide an overview of assisted living. Some of you may not know what it is. You should know by the end of his talk, and also highlight some of the challenging issues that he finds coming up as an operator. So to start, I'm going to introduce Jim Emmerton. I have a bio for him, but it's kind of funny to use a bio because actually Jim is kind of my boss. So Jim Emmerton is the Executive Director of the BC Law Institute, which is the parent body for the Canadian Centre for Elder Law. And what I find really interesting about Jim's career and what he brings to this kind of thinking is he's a lawyer by training, but he worked in a corporate sector for quite a long time before coming later on into his career into a nonprofit sector to think about law reform. And I think that's brought a very interesting perspective to thinking about this kind of work. Jim was the chair of the Assisted Living Project Committee, so he'll also be able to answer questions about that. But his presentation today is going to focus very specifically on some of the things to consider when you move into a different housing model as you age.
Okay, things to think about. So this is a little different situation, obviously, than the presentation we just had, which is renters. We're talking here about people who own their home and are considering whether they should move at this point in their life into a rental unit or into assisted living. And the first thing to think about it, if they own their home, is what is the home? If it's the home on the left side, it's quite a different decision moving from there to 1,200 square feet or 800 square feet or 600 square feet than if you're already owning in a condo that's 1,200. So maybe it's not such a big step. So that's they're 2 quite different situations there. So that's the first thing. I'm going to divide what I'm talking about in kind of 3 buckets. One, things to consider. Take a life inventory if you're the person thinking about this. The second bucket of things, how much control can you manage, which is really related to the to the first thing, but will help you decide whether which direction you should go, and then finally I'll do a compare and contrast of rental versus assisted living, and it's going to be really top line because the experts are going to give us much more detail than I will. So first of all, taking a life inventory, is your current home affordable for you? And in the sense that, do you need the equity in the home? Do you have equity in your home? And do you need the equity in your home to live? And depending on where you live in British Columbia and how long you've been in your house and when you bought it and so forth, you may have a small amount of equity, or you actually may have quite a large amount of equity that can be a big help to you in your future years. So that's a question to ask, and it will be different for every person to answer. Can you physically manage your home at this point? And I've known several people, and we probably all know people who are getting to the stage where the home that they're currently in can be an issue. Does it have different levels so that it's becoming dangerous? Does it have stairs and the person's no longer able to climb stairs? Can you change the light fixtures? I lived in a home at one point where the light fixtures were 16 feet, like in this room. So when you're 75, you probably don't want to be trying to change those things. Do you have the resources to maintain your house, and can you do it by yourself? Do you have family around who can help you? Do you have Can you afford to pay contractors, or is it time to say, no, I don't want to deal with all that maintenance, time to move on? Are major repairs needed? And that can be if you're living in a standalone home, or if you're in a condo. If you're in a condo and you're thinking they're going to have to replace the roof soon and it's going to cost a lot of money, or some other major repair, maybe you want to think, well, now's a good time to sell and not be bothered with that with the hassle. The impact of your home on your lifestyle. Do you have good neighbors? I mean, I think about my mother lived in Ontario for many years, grew up in a community, had family and friends around for a long time. So she had great neighbors, great friends and acquaintances that were around and fairly close to her. But interestingly enough, as you approach 85 to 90, a lot of those friends disappear. They're the same age, unable to come, they die, and you can end up being in your home and actually be lonely, notwithstanding that she was a very gregarious person. So you need to be realistic about what is happening to you in terms of your friends and your family. Are they around and close, and would a change of living actually help that situation? Are you ready to downsize? Here's a question that's fairly obvious, but it's interesting when you talk to people how difficult this decision is. People do get wedded to their stuff. And you know, we all say that, well, we it's just stuff, and we're not. But the fact is, we are. It's difficult to give up the bed that you've had for a smaller one, or the furniture that you've had, or personal things. You know, are you willing to give up the boxes that have your children's elementary school report cards in them, or whatever? That's a hard decision, but everybody has to come to that decision eventually, and you have to ask yourself, when am I willing to do that? This question is it better to move now or in 5 years? I've seen situations, a particular situation where a woman was in her early 80s, was in living in a condo that she owned, and was sort of talking about moving, but the fact was she was already too late. She no longer had the energy to actually go and do a move, and so it ended up that she stayed where she was, and the next move actually wasn't to assisted living. It was to a full service situation. So you need to be realistic about what's happening to you now, and what's it going to be like a year from now and 2 years from now, and when is the right time to make that move. So now into the second part, how much control can you manage? And some of this stuff is related to the first part. Do you still want to cook? Are you still able to clean? Are you still able to maintain your house? All those things are important questions for people to ask. I have a brother who's a little older than me who's in a facility, and he loves the fact that he's given up his independent living because I shouldn't say this, but he wasn't a great cook anyway. But he loves where he is because he's getting great meals now compared to where he was, and lots of other good things as well. But so you need to be realistic about how much control can you manage, and what alternatives are out there that might actually be better. Are you mentally capable? This is probably the hardest one for somebody to answer. You know, someone will tell you, well, I'm getting forgetful. Well, maybe that means that's a safety issue. Are you likely to leave the stove on and cause yourself a fire hazard or whatever? That's a very tough issue for people to address, but very important to address if you're starting to lose mental capacity. Maybe you want to think about assisted living as opposed to moving into rentals. Do you have sufficient supports? We kind of talked about this earlier. Are there family, friends, and so forth around that can help you manage the house the home that you have now? And then the big question, are there any abuse concerns? And sometimes a move could actually alleviate that. If there is someone living close or a family member or whatever, you may be better in assisted living where there's some other people watching what's going on and prevent financial abuse or other types of abuse. So moving into the third part then, just quickly going through a list of things, rental versus assisted living. Keeping your important stuff. Yes, if you go into a rental place, you can keep some of the stuff, and depending again on where you come from, less so in assisted living. You're going to be limited to what you can take. Privacy. Clearly, if you're renting, you have probably a little less privacy than when you own, but you still have privacy. Assisted living, you have reduced privacy. You're trading that off for more security. Security of your person. Obviously, if you move from an own to a rental, you're going to be self-reliant. If you're in assisted living, you have 24-hour support. Health monitoring. Same thing if you're in a rental, you're self-reliant. You have better access to health, I think, in an assisted living facility. Does it feel like home? Probably if you move from an owned condo to a rental condo, it will feel, independent and like home. On the other hand, some people move into assisted living and they love it. So the old saw, the home is where your heart is, really is true. Personal independence, yes, you're going to have more if you move to a rental place, less so if you move into assisted living. Campus of care, clearly if you move into a rental building, you don't have a campus of care situation. Al might want to talk more about this later. I know that they have facilities that are a campus of care. So if you're thinking forward, I need to go into assisted living now, and maybe 3 or 4 years from now I'm going to need more care. Thinking about a campus of care is really great, so you don't have a big move. Somebody can put you in a chair and walk you 200 feet to the facility that has more services. So that's an important consideration. Meals provided. If you're going to rent, you're going to still cook your own meals. In assisted living, you have them provided. Housing and services cost controls. They're just different. We were hearing earlier about the controls on rental rules. The assisted living rules are slightly different, and I think Al will talk about that later. Dispute resolution. If you have a dispute, dispute resolution is actually treated differently if you're in rental than it is under the assisted living rules. There's a whole chapter on it in the assisted living report if you would like to know more about that. Smoking allowed depends on the building. In assisted living, it tends to be controlled to specific places. And that's it. That's my list. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jim. So I'm going to introduce the next speaker, and we're going to bump into each other on the way over here.
Doing PowerPoint changing.
Oh, are you going to do the honors of the technical now that you've figured it out? Or are we going to call Anna Maria?
If I escape, that will work.
I'll let you do the technical while I do the introductions, and hopefully we'll both move forward at the same pace. We got a PC person up to the front. Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. So Martha Jane Lewis is probably familiar to a lot of you in the room. She's spoken at seniors conferences around the city many, many times. She's a practicing lawyer and the executive director of the BC Centre for Elder Advocacy and Support. And we all know CEASE is a nonprofit organization that funded by the Law Foundation that works for the rights of seniors and currently has an elder law clinic, a number of programs, including the elder law clinic and an advocacy program. Useful in terms of this talk, Martha Jane is also a supervisory lawyer for the Tenant Resource and Advisory Center, and I know she was the executive director there as well for a number of years, so she brings great knowledge around tenants' issues. She's a very long resume, but I can just tell you that she has a law degree, a master's of laws, and a BA in economics, and she brings great knowledge to this topic. So she's going to be focusing on issues from a legal perspective in terms of rights and responsibilities for tenants, condo owners, and also for landlords.
And I'm going to do it all in 15 minutes. So.
We may have a couple more minutes because Jim was
I won't be mean. Basically, the PowerPoint gives lists of resources. So if anybody wants to know more, to find out more themselves, you can get the information from the PowerPoint.
I should also mention that we sent a copy of the PowerPoint to Gloria, all 3 PowerPoints, and Martha Jane's presentation has a lot of,
links,
intense content. So you can feel free to share that PowerPoint with anyone who's registered.
So originally this topic was things to consider before selling your home and moving into a rental unit or assisted living. However, quite a lot of people as they age rent out their own property in one form or another. We hear of older single people who move in together and they rent out one of their houses while they see how things are going to work out. Or they have a holiday home that they're no longer using because they're not skiing anymore, or getting to the cottage is a problem, so they may just be renting that out till they decide when's a good time to sell. Others are turning their basement into a rental suite for extra income so they can stay in their home. So we're seeing some older adults becoming landlords. Other people, when they retire, they may decide to move closer to their kids, and they'll rent a place while they look around for a new property to buy. So for a year or so, they may become a tenant. So Jim, I don't think he did touch some of the major differences between owning and renting. It's a huge transition from having your own house and your own yard to living next to strangers. It's secondhand smoke, noise from other people. It gets really nasty. There's a recent court case where the judge said the situation was worse than a soap opera because you really had condo owners egging each other, sabotaging their scooters. This is in BC, so yeah, and you can't choose your neighbours. On the assisted living project, we spent 2 months talking about secondhand smoke problems. With alcohol, people stay in their own units usually, but secondhand smoke is hard to avoid. And it can be very frustrating if you've always taken care of your own property and now you're told what you can and can't do. The good landlords, good tenants, bad tenants. Some of the worst problems are between tenants, And legally, it is not up to the two tenants to resolve their disputes. It's up to the landlord to ensure that the bad tenant stops doing what he's doing, or evict him, or give rent reduction to the good tenant. There are legal nuances involved here which are important. BC has a law, Residential Tenancy Act, and a residential tenancy branch. The website, there's tons of information on the residential tenancy branch, multilingual for both landlords and tenants. The rights and responsibilities are pretty clearly set out. Compared to most of the world, the law here is quite good. There are things we don't like, of course. Disputes about rent increases, what's reasonable, and not allowing pets. I think only 10% of units in BC allow pets, as opposed to Ontario, where landlords can't refuse to have pets. It's a real difference. Tenancy agreements are important. Even if there's not a written agreement, the law assumes there is an agreement. So if it's a legal suite or an illegal suite, doesn't matter to the law. It's still a landlord-tenant relationship. Matters to the municipality and maybe declaring your income tax, but that's different issues. Tenancy agreement is super important. There's lots of small print. One thing we pushed for at TRAC was to have larger type for older adults. They also have on the TRAC website, I'll get to later, there's translations into Punjabi and Chinese of the standard tenancy agreements, because many owners and tenants come from different countries and backgrounds. Fixed term compared to month tenancy is seriously important. Many people end up in a fixed term tenancy of 1 year, and what happens when that year is up. Moving in, security and pet deposits, every province is different. In Ontario, it's your first and last month's rent. In BC, you can only charge half a month rent as a security deposit, another half a month rent for pets. So people coming from other provinces often don't know the law's different. It's worth checking, or from other countries. Changing locks, providing keys, replacing keys. Yes, the landlord can charge you if you lose the clicker for the garage, and it can be quite a lot of money. You cannot change the locks and not give a copy to your landlord unless you get a permission from the residential tenancy branch to do so. Copies of the tenancy agreement, people can be sloppy about, but you shouldn't. Move-in inspection reports, very important. We know it can be hard for a landlord to prove damage was done if he doesn't have proof. Hard for a tenant to prove he didn't do the damage. It was like that when he moved in. A lot of hearings go around getting your security deposit back because of the inspection reports. The method of paying rent, the landlord has the right to decide how rent should be paid. If he wants direct deposit or checks. I had a really good case about the check is in the mail. In fact, if you mail your rent check by the date it's due, that's enough, even if it takes 3 days to get there. I lost that case. So, paying for utilities. The landlord can evict you if you're not paying for your utilities. It's not just rent. As people age and travel, maybe they go to Palm Springs for 6 weeks, or 6 months, and if you set up automatic payments for utility and rent when you're away, saves you a lot of grief. During the tenancy, quiet enjoyment doesn't mean noise. It means you can enjoy your place in a reasonable way that includes quietness. So it's not literal. I don't know why they use that term. The standard is reasonable. We know people are not reasonable way often. Where I work, we have our lawyer, one of our lawyers here, as well as our legal advocate. A lot of our calls are to do with housing. Strata housing, rental housing, unhappy people. And often one of the parties is completely unreasonable. They're not going to let the landlord in to do repairs. It drives you nuts because they won't take advice. They won't act on it. Spoiled. There is a duty to accommodate disabilities to the point of unreasonableness. So if a ramp is needed to get into a building, whether strata or apartment, the landlord can be ordered to spend the $50,000 to put that in. If it's strata, the other strata owners can be ordered to pay their share because one person in the building needs access that way. If you need a grab rail or other changes to the unit, the landlord has to put those in if it would be considered reasonable. That's dealt with by the human rights group. The residential tenancy branch will not listen to human rights questions. Tenants must leave an emergency contract with the landlord, because what happens, sometimes somebody has a stroke, they go into hospital, the landlord doesn't know if he's ever coming back. There's no contact information. They should at that point actually call the public guardian trustee, who will sort things out for them. But you don't want to be in hospital nervous, wondering what's happening to all your possessions because you can't communicate anymore and the landlord doesn't know where you are. But they get information. Repairs and safety. The most common problems is getting repairs done. Landlords don't want to do repairs. It costs money and they're not seeing the benefit. For tenants, some situations are appalling. They can be dangerous for people who are not steady on their feet. It can be unsafe bathrooms. It can be torn carpets, stairs. Repairs requests should be made in writing. Keep a written record of everything. The residential tenancy branch has very good fact sheets setting out who's responsible for what. So the tenant has to change their own light bulbs within the unit. The landlord does the light bulbs in the hall. It's all set out. Even how often the walls should be painted and the carpets should be repaired. There are guidelines about that. Sometimes people withhold their rent because repairs aren't being done. That's really risky. You can get an eviction notice for not paying your rent. So always call the residential tenancy branch and say, can I withhold my rent? Get the date you call the person you talk to so you have some evidence that I was told this is so serious, it's okay if I don't pay my rent. If they have the guts to tell you that. Hearings at the residential tenancy branch take a long time, but some are good arbitrators, some are not so good. It's a bit of a crapshoot because it's not like going to court. There's no precedent setting. So you can have two people with the same issue in front of two arbitrators on the same day, get completely opposite decisions, and they're both valid. So I spent one summer at law school reading all the residential tenancy branch decisions I could get my hands on to set up a database. So it's interesting. The safety of all tenants is important. So just because you think you should have your way doesn't mean you're going to get it if you're putting the safety of other residents at risk. Like hoarding, cluttering, leaving your scooter, which is gas-powered, in the hallway, blocking exits. Really, if the safety of others in the building is at risk, you'll probably get evicted. It's not all about you. Rentals, I'm discovering. Rentals in condos, really, the stratas are all different. They set their own conditions. Some like renters, some hate them. Dispute resolution, even if you're a tenant renting a condo unit, and a lot of people do rent condo units, you don't go to the residential tenancy branch to resolve the dispute. You have to go to court, which is expensive. In the spring of next year, the Civil Resolution Tribunal should be up and running for resolving strata disputes and small claims. And it's really neat because it's mostly done online. You each write your arguments, and then if you need more help, you pay a little bit, and a government person gets involved to help you resolve the dispute. So it's actually quite cool. I went to a presentation a few months ago. Condominium Homeowners Association, I suggest everybody become a member if you own a condo. They won't help you if you're not a member, so. End of tenancy. Risks of moving out without giving proper notice. If you have a 1-year fixed-term tenancy and you just decide to move out without telling the landlord, and he can't rent it out even though he tries for a few months, you're on the hook for paying the rent until someone else takes it over. Also, the liquidated damages. You could be ordered to pay for the landlord to advertise in the newspaper to find a new tenant. Notice to end tenancy for cause if you're really noisy, if you're disturbing others, if you can't sleep at night and you walk around in heeled slippers and you have your TV up loud and smoking away. They can kick you out. Landlord use of property, that's a concern. That's what Sandra was talking about, Sharon, Isaac, is where landlords want to use the property themselves. And then they give you 2 months rent, but they have to give you 1 month free to compensate you for moving. There's some good things in the law if you look into it. Also, move out inspection, take photos. Here's contact for the residential tenancy branch. As you can see, they have guides in 4 languages, tons of fact sheets, policy guidelines, the forms, standard tenancy agreements, an interest rate calculator. You get interest back on your security deposit when you move out. Some information officers are been there longer than others and know more than others. TRAC, Tenant Resource Advisory Center, has a phone line and experienced staff who can give information on any questions. A guide in 3 languages, including a landlord guide and an info for newcomers. There are videos in 17 languages. So if you have a tenant who, a lot of these are like African languages, European, Asian, can be really useful because tenancy relationships are different in every country and in every province. Actually, on their website, we even have some interesting fact sheets comparing residential tenancy law in BC to in other countries. And we had a couple of law students do that work a few summers ago, and it's fascinating, the differences. If you have nothing better to do, I'd just look at that out of curiosity. So, Landlord BC, newly formed organization. Even if you just are renting out your basement suite, or you have a condo for an investment property that you're renting out, Landlord BC, it's pretty cheap to become a member, and they will answer questions for you and provide forms. A lot of good information. This is where I work. As I say, we have 2 lawyers and a legal advocate who help people with residential tenancy problems, assisted living. Residential care, we're almost finished a manual called Legal Issues in Residential Care, which will be out this summer. It's just been, we're getting feedback now, and it will be an internet book or ebook. It will be up on our website for anybody to access, and it talks about, where people are denied visitors into residential care or, having their lives controlled, over medication, under medication, medical treatment without consent. And the last page talks about the legal issues we do, which again includes housing matters here. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha Jane. I'm just going to introduce Jina, although I left my notes over there, so I might have to wing it. Although I know Jina fairly well, he's a lawyer and a health service executive, and he's done work with the Canadian Centre for Elder Law in different capacities over the years, speaking at our conferences, and he was involved in our assisted living project. Al has been the president and CEO of Park Place Seniors Living since 1993. They provide seniors care and housing to over 1,800 seniors in BC and in Alberta. He was recently appointed he was an advisor for 3 years on our assisted living project, and his organization is interesting in that they operate a number of housing situations which offer a campus of care opportunity for residents. Al has a significant resume. He was presented with Member of the Year Award by the BC Care Providers Association in 2008. He currently serves on their board. He's previously served on the boards of the Alberta Continuing Care Association, the Health Employers Association of BC, and Continuing Legal Education Society of BC, and brings great expertise around labor relations as well. He's going to be speaking with a focus on assisted living, given his experience as an operator of assisted living. And I know personally from working with Al that he has great vision and excitement about moving forward changes in how we look at assisted living in BC and Alberta. So,
thank you, Krista, for that introduction. Yeah. So I've had the great pleasure of working with Jim and Martha and great specialists. Jane Purdy, who is the national chair of the Elder Law section of the Canadian Bar Association. We had representatives from BC Housing. The assisted living registrar was an ex officio member of our advisory group, and we all worked over 3 years fleshing out all the issues over assisted living. So what should you consider before you move into an assisted living suite? And that is what I'm going to mostly focus on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
I will. Yeah, I don't know why it's on.
Just Al.
Yes.
Fast.
Yeah, you're on the auto thing. It's
Sure. Okay. All right. Sure. So what is assisted living? And assisted living is housing that is intended for senior citizens and persons with disabilities. You have a private apartment combined with hospitality services, meals, laundry, light housekeeping, and activity programs are also included. In addition, assisted living residents may also receive some personal care services, help with bathing, dressing, so activities of daily living is what it is. I'll hit the back or just hold it down. Yeah, maybe that works. Oh, that goes to back. Okay. And must demonstrate medical need for personal care services. So assisted living on the continuum of care is between independent living and complex care, and so you can see that that is where it is located. And you notice that small photograph with that pet, and I'm going to discuss pets as well too in assisted living further down. Access to government subsidized assisted living is through health authorities. The number of assisted living units has expanded very significantly in BC during the last decade. So from 2004 to 2011, the number of units increased from 1786 to 6,832. And with an aging population, demand has also increased as well too. There is a waiting list for most government subsidized suites. Residents in assisted living can come and go as they please. So assisted living suites and residents are not suitable for residents with dementia. They would be at great risk in assisted living, and they need a different type of housing. And what we see in BC right now is some experimentation with creating licensed dementia suites or neighborhoods. Subsidized and private pay options. Approximately 2/3 of the assisted living units in BC are publicly subsidized by regional health authorities and BC Housing. Subsidized residents pay 70% of their after-tax income for their apartment and support services. Non-subsidized residents pay for their own accommodation and services, and rates vary from residence to residence. The subsidized suites are allocated by the health authority, and usually there's a care assessment testing that does take place. In Friesen Health Authority, for example, right now the home is best. So when you are in hospital ready to return home and you request moving into an assisted living unit, the health authority will say, no, you have to go home first. You do need to go home. We want to see if you are capable of staying at home on your own. Only if you fall or are at risk, then we will consider you for an assisted living unit in a facility. Park Place Living, we operate the following assisted living in BC, and each facility has its own sort of unique challenges. Each facility is unique in its own way. So Courtyard Terrace Assisted Living Residence is in Burnaby. It is located on Boundary Road, a few blocks away from the TELUS building. And the challenge we have here is obviously that we have a very huge waiting list. There's 40,000 cars that go by on Boundary Road every day. We had a sign up there before, and we were getting so many calls, and we had no space. And so we actually just removed that sign and just put it on the narrow, the residential street, which had less traffic. So that is what we had to do. Mountain Lake Seniors Community, it's a campus of care in Nelson. And I lived in Nelson for a few years. And the challenge here is that elderly residents want to stay in Nelson. So if you have a resident who needs specialized psychogeriatric care, there is immense resistance by the family and the resident to move to Trail where they can get those services. But the good thing about Mountain Lake is that, and when we designed it, we wanted a campus of care, is that when your care needs increase, you can then move over to the residential care side of this campus. And one of the key sort of complaints often of assisted living is that residents will say when they are the most vulnerable, when they've had a fall, when they're in hospital, that is when the facility will kick us out and send us on to a newer facility where they have to start coping with a new home, a new setting, new staff, and that just adds to their anxiety. Shannon Falls is in Squamish, where we have both independent and assisted living as well too. With the young, active adults, of course, there's more activities, and that's a community. And Sunridge Place in Duncan, BC, on Vancouver Island as well too, where you have a very large aging demographic, and that is where you get calls and emails, especially on Thursdays and Fridays from the Health Authority to expedite admissions. They're trying to, from acute care facilities, etc., trying to manage their care load and caseloads over a weekend, especially if a long weekend is coming up. The legislative framework is the Community Care and Assisted Living Act, especially in Part 3. And this framework, when they set up, it was mostly to get the whole assisted living regime set up. It really did not address, they didn't look too far ahead in terms of what the issues were. The view was to look at that down the road. And so the framework is fairly skeletal. The BC Residential Tenancy Act does not apply to assisted living residences. So the rules that you may be familiar with under the rental tenancy legislation, do not necessarily apply here. So because the legal framework does not clearly define the rights and responsibilities of residents, it is important to understand the individual policies of each residence. So you'll have to spend some time when you are considering admission to an assisted living facility. Go there for lunch. Ask them questions. Do take a tour of the facility, and if there's anything specific that you're looking for, make sure you ask. And as I say, due to the skeletal nature of the current legislation, there are areas of legal uncertainty. And this is one of the reasons, the gaps in the law was one of the reasons why we did have this project, and why we do have this report with many recommendations on how the legislation in this area can be strengthened. Obtain an agreement in writing on admission with the operator, and the agreement should specify the rental and service terms, especially with regard to notice of termination and rent increases. And that is something that you should pay attention to when you are considering admission into an assisted living facility. What do they have on? Do they have an LPN on at nights? Because in some rural areas it's very difficult to get nursing staff. They will have a carried on at nights. And what are the are they going to be wearing pennants? who pays for that? What are the call alarm systems that are in place? Take a look at the menu. Take a look at the activities board. See what's on. Is there something that appeals to mom or dad? Do they have a bus? Are they going to be going on outings? Those are the things that you should be looking at as well too. Shared space and shared rights. Residents, they do live in a congregate setting, and what it is it's quiet enjoyment model. You are as operators, we often have to arbitrate between different residents, different tenants, and what they like and don't like. You will have certain items on the menu as you walk around the dining room. You'll notice that there's far more leftovers. You notice that this menu has sort of fallen out of favor. It is not particularly popular. And then you usually have resident committee council. You ask them what their favorites are, and you start changing a menu. These are the things. You may have a lot of men at one time who like playing horseshoes, and then of course that changes over time, and you may try to have some different activities in place as well too. Policies on pets. Different residences have different policies on pets. Some allow pets, some don't. Some seniors have allergies. Very often, you have to look at pet size as well too, and how friendly they are to the other residents. And instead of individual pets, many residents have a house pet usually, because it's very hard if you've grown up and you've had a pet for many years. It's very difficult to move into assisted living and give up your pet. But we do have a house pet. In most facilities do. And whether personal pets are allowed should be discussed with the assisted living operator before moving in. Smoking, with a smoking regime, residents may smoke outdoors in an area that is 3 meters away from a doorway, window, or air intake of a building. Assisted living facilities may designate an indoor smoking room. It's very expensive to have a ventilation system. It could cost up to $30,000. So many don't do that. Many prefer to have a gazebo or an outside area where you can go, and it gets your residents sort of outside in the garden as well too, or inside a courtyard, and that's where smoking is allowed. Choosing to move, residents can move out of assisted living, but it usually takes a long time to find an alternate place to go. If your care needs are worsened, you have to wait for a spot to open up in a residential care facility, and that usually involves a lot of discussion with your case manager from the health authority. They will assess you. They will do up your write-up on your charts, and then place you for placement in a facility. But it can take a fair amount of time sometimes, and while that is going on, what happens? If you have someone who has had a fall and and cannot toilet themselves, or a 2-person lift, then what do you do? Do you allow that person to stay in their room? You could put some supports. You can have them wear hip protectors. Some may go even as far as actually removing the bed and putting the mattress on the floor so they don't fall out of bed at night. But these decisions are made in discussion with the family, in discussion with their care providers as well as the nurse. Resolving complaints. The AL registrar encourages you to first approach the operator directly, and if it's not resolved, residents can lay a complaint through the assisted living registrar. In Park Place, we have been around for 20 years, and we started in a small rural community of Nelson, BC, and have grown and are now in BC and Alberta. Thank you very much.
I think we have some time for questions, Gloria, right? We have about 10 minutes left. So if you have questions, if you want to just go over to the mic, I think there, so you can be better heard.
Yeah, I have a question. I just wondered if a landlord suspects that a tenant has a serious hoarding problem and it could pose a threat, fire, whatever, what is the legal right of a landlord to enter a tenant's suite and inspect it?
Under the law, the landlord has a right to go into a rental unit once a month. They can't go poking through the drawers and cupboards, but they are allowed in. That law was brought in a few years ago to push back against grow-ops, marijuana grow-ops. So the landlord can go in. If he thinks it's a concern and has no one to talk to about it, he can always call the fire department. The fire department will come in and make an order that something has to be done. And if the hoarding is a really difficult mental health issue, to get help for hoarders, the City of Vancouver has a number you can call. Most municipalities don't. Very difficult to take care of.
Thank you. Hi, Catherine. Go ahead.
Hello. The world of assisted living can be quite complicated. One of the complexities that I have trouble with myself is some people that offer assisted living, you pay your 1 month's fee and it includes 2 personal care services. Other places that refer themselves to as assisted living, you pay 1 fee, but that is really for supportive houses. So it includes your meals, your entertainment, and housekeeping. And then you pay an extra amount for assisted living services. And one example of those is Courtyard Terrace. So I'm just wondering if anyone has comments about this, because for the general public, they say, oh, assisted living, it'll be 1 fee for my mom and we'll know what the fee's going to be every month. But then another place that also says it provides assisted living as a monthly fee, and then on top of that, extra fees for services. So, assisted living does not always mean the same thing.
Any one of you can answer that question.
Sure, I'll take a stab at addressing that. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. There are some supportive living facilities that call them assisted living, and they just really provide a few assisted living supports. There are a prescribed set of assisted living services, and if you provide 2 of them, then only can you call yourself properly an assisted living service. Now, what it is some families will come and say, look, I want to put mom in. She just needs some dietary, meals, and laundry. She really does not. She can take her own medications. She remembers that. She doesn't really need any personal care service. So what happens there? Can I put her in, and then if a condition then deteriorates, then I will purchase personal care service. I want that option. So in that case, you will see a split out. You will see sort of a basic package of service, which is meals, laundry, dietary, and some light housekeeping. And then if they do need more care, then you buy, like you'll say, I want a nurse to come and supervise taking of medications, regular, because that's all I need. Other facilities, and those who are subsidized, where you know that very likely they're coming straight from hospital, or they have been already assessed by a nurse, a community nurse, already needing with high needs, and not just supported living. Those facilities will offer the whole package, and it'll be all inclusive. 3 meals a day with an LPN on 24 hours, and providing far greater supervision as well too.
Just before the next question, I just wanted to pop up about the assisted living report. I just brought a few, and they're all gone. If anyone would, first of all, the report is accessible on our website. Also, if you want to contact me, we can get you one. So I've got a bunch of cards here. If somebody wants to take my card afterward, I'd be happy to give it to you.
Go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned that Residential Tenancy Act doesn't apply to the assisted living. And I think you must be aware the ombudsperson came up with some recommendations on regulating because here is more vulnerable so-called tenants than the renters, and yet they are not protected. So can you tell us what is happening on that, and also the complaint system? And if you could touch on the family councils too.
Sure.
Because they are not effective.
No, I know that the Ombudsman's office was involved in the project committee on assisted living, so sort of fed in and out of that process. Jim, do you want to speak to those recommendations?
Yeah, our report agreed with the recommendation that's in the ombudsperson's report as well. So we made the same recommendation that the same rules should apply. I think you have to ask Christy Clark what's happening.
That's a bit poignant.
Well, I think there's two. I would say now we also have a seniors advocate in BC. So I would say follow up with the ombudsperson and put pressure on the ombudsperson's putting pressure on the Ministry of Health to move forward her recommendations. But we have a seniors advocate in BC as well, and that's another outlet for putting pressure to move forward on some of these recommendations. I think the seniors advocate's going to be touring BC shortly.
This is a slightly different stream, and it goes back to Mr. Emmerton talking about, do you sell what equity you have in your home? There's another avenue that maybe to protect elders needs to be looked at. We're in a time of low returns on investments, and I happen to know a person who's been involved as a peer counselor, no charge, for people who have gone to investment advisors, even at a credit union, where what the fees that the advisor were taking was eating away at the principal, and getting them out of that. Because if you want to have enough to last, you want to put that equity. And has your committee taken a look at that problem as well? It's a growing one, given our economic conditions.
It is a growing one. I think you'll be surprised at my answer. Actually, I've got to put another hat on. I'm a director of the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investments, which is an organization that deals with disputes that people have with their investment advisors and their banks. It's a national organization, so there is a dispute resolution mechanism that you can go to. And the first thing you do, obviously, is to go back to your advisor and say, hey, whatever advice shouldn't have been given to this person. If you don't get resolution, then you can then go to OBSI. I won't hear about it because I don't hear individual cases, but I am on the board of that organization.
And they have a fairly robust website, OBSI, if you want to go look it up and see what some of your options are. No one's standing up, and I think it's probably time to wrap up the panel for Gloria. So I'd just like to thank all of our panelists for being here. It's been a very informative and robust panel.